First of all, I know you've been married a very long time. Not forever, but a goodly number of years.
That's true.
And you've been writing together for about 20 years, more or less, yes?
Actually, Agent of Change came out in 1988, and we wrote it in 1984.
Okay, so more than that.
Yes.
Yeah, we began collaborating in about 1979, I think.
Yeah, that would be about right.
We had I was the managing editor of a science fiction newspaper, and Sharon was right along for the ride one day, and there was a story that needed to be fixed, and she helped fix that, and the next thing we knew, we were writing copy together on the newspaper that day. So that would have been about 1979, I guess, for the Starswarm News.
Well, how does this process work without killing each other? How do you manage to do this?
It seems fairly natural. The story that came out of the collaboration with the newspaper, one of the things we also needed to do, the newspaper was a mix of real news and news from across the multiverse. So we had to put in not only paid classifieds from real people who had money, but also the multiverse people who never paid their bills. So what we did was we sat down and we did a bunch of fake classifieds. And one of them was for a wizards contest for the senior apprentices who needed to win their staffs. And we went, there's a story there.
There's a story there, and as we did the classified, it kept saying, what happened,
and we came up with a name for the apprentice, the world's most inept apprentice, and a scene. And I went upstairs, and at that point we had this humongous bookkeeping typewriter that had been electrified. So it made this rumbling sound. It sounded like a locomotive upstairs, and you had to throw it by hand. So you're and I had typed, I guess, the first half a page. This guy's master has sent a summoning down to him and said, "Kendall, get up here! You left the window open." And he's like halfway up the tower, and he has stopped, and I have gotten a job.
Fantastic.
So I went to work the next day, and Kindle is still in the stairway, and got home, and I was working for lawyers, which is an exhausting experience.
Yeah.
So I got home, and I kind of exhausted. I fell in and says, Kendall is still in the stairway. Steve stood it for about 3 days. He called me at work. He said, I think I know where it goes. Can I finish it?
And that was the first real collaboration we did. The fact is that Sharon was not just easy with this. She said, as long as I can change it, and as long as I can say no. And so we did that. Now, we came to it honestly because we both had experience writing in groups with other people. I was a newspaper editor and had done, and when you're a newspaper editor or you're doing features or even news for a paper, you're used to the important thing being the story.
You have to get the story right. The facts have got to be right.
And it's not necessarily your words at the end, but that the story is right. And Sharon had some of the same kinds of experience.
I had done advertising copy, which is even more of a collaborative experience. You have the creative director and your boss, and the client, and the client's boss.
So the net result was that we were fairly easily melded to the project, and we discovered very quickly that each project had its own voice. And once we were able to turn over to the voice, as it were, it just seems to work well.
And we're both natural mimics, and one of the things which doesn't serve us well when we're writing our own stuff. I can't read fiction. I can't read science fiction while I'm writing this book because I'll start to pick up the voice of the person that I'm reading. So I read a lot of biographies and mysteries.
That makes sense.
And the funny thing is that we both, when we met, we both were fans of Georgette Heyer and Regency type romances.
Dorothy Sayers.
And so we had this common background that wasn't science fiction that we could both fall back into, and then it turned out that we ended up using those kind of things in stories, the romance and the interaction, and that was part of the thing that we ended up best at, I think.
Now, just out of curiosity, I know that you met in Maryland. I think you met in Maryland. Mm-hmm. How'd you end up in Maine, and what keeps you there?
We like it there. Really.
Okay.
We ended up in Maine because in Maryland we were living in the Baltimore area, and we could not afford as freelancers to live there. I had been making my living before I met Sharon. I was doing book reviews, music reviews, writing besides that kind of thing, I was writing hard news and doing copylog and whatever I could do to scramble, and it was always a scramble. Sharon started getting into doing some of the freelance writing, but it was still always a scramble. And then we sold our first 3 books. And so we had a lump of money, and we could see that if we stayed where we were, that lump of money would be gone in a year.
And in Maine, that lump of money was a lump of money. In Maine, you can be a freelance writer and live and have like a house with roof.
Plus it's pretty, right?
Yes, and it's pretty.
Yeah,
Roof, heat, cats, the whole thing.
This is 2009. You said StellarCon 2009. We're paying for our 2,000 square foot house on the edge of a snowmobile trail with
1-2 acres with trees
and trees, and we've got the eagles fly over, and we've got sometimes the coyotes or the raccoons, and it's a very comfortable place. Wood stove in the basement in case the power goes out.
When the power goes out.
And we're comfortable there, and we're paying less for a mortgage now than we were paying for a townhouse in a semi-slum when we were
20 years
rent in a townhouse in the semi-slum in the Baltimore area back then.
And when we moved to Maine, a friend of mine wrote me a letter basically saying, "What the hell are you doing in Maine?" Because, you know, in case of nuclear war, yeah, I guess it'll be okay because it takes everything 20 years to get to Maine.
Not so bad, though.
No, it's worked out very well for us. And even when we were looking for places to move, we had thought maybe Western Maryland, but that didn't work out for a number of reasons. And we wrote to people in a number of states and said, "Gee, would you recommend moving there?" And the people we got answers from were Tom Easton in Maine, Barry Longyear in Maine. The writers who lived in Maine were friendly. They were willing to help us find things, and they all said it's great here. And Barry Longyear is still there, and Tom Easton is still there, and
Oh, that's great.
so yeah, there was already a science fiction writers community there.